When anyone dares to point out the obvious flaws in the mad dash for EVs and net zero, and after the obligatory branding as a climate change denier and a Luddite, the evangelist will point to Norway and say, "Oh, look, it's all so wonderful and idyllic in Norway, with all the fields and scenery and electric cars and shit." And no doubt a parrot pining for the fields. But the truth of the matter is very different, for many reasons which are usually swept under the carpet. The main one of these is the fact that nearly all of Norway's electricity is from hydroelectric generation. There's almost no other capacity required. They're literally drowning in cheap renewable hydropower. But the most shocking thing about all this EV bluster is that, despite 80-odd% of new vehicles being EVs, and almost a full quarter of all vehicles being electric, Norway's oil consumption hasn't declined. Barely at all. Why? Because internal combustion engines are still going strong. That's why. Welcome back to MGUY, British engineer and lawyer, now Sydney-based YouTuber. Be sure to follow me on the usual socials for more content, links in the description, and there's a code on the screen. Scan that with your phone if you want to sign up for an occasional MGUY email. It'd be great to have you on board. So Norway has what most countries are missing, namely an almost entirely renewable electricity grid, which puts it in a unique position compared to most other industrialised countries. Despite this glaring anomaly, Norway is still held up as the poster child of EVs and net zero for the Green Left media, like this fawning article in the New York Times. In Norway, the electric vehicle future has already arrived. About 80% of new cars sold in Norway are battery-powered. As a result, the air is cleaner, the streets are quieter, and the grid hasn't collapsed, and there are rainbows and unicorns everywhere. But problems with unreliable chargers persist. About 110 miles south of Oslo, along a highway lined with pine and birch trees, a shiny fueling station offers a glimpse of a future where electric vehicles rule. Chargers far outnumber gasoline pumps at the service area operated by Circle K, a retail chain that got its start in Texas. During summer weekends, when Oslo residents flee to country cottages, the line to recharge sometimes backs up down the off-ramp. What, and that's a good thing? Marit Bergsland, who works at the store, has had to learn how to help frustrated customers connect to chargers, in addition to her regular duties flipping burgers and ringing up purchases of salty licorice, a popular treat. "Sometimes we have to give them a coffee to calm down," she said. Again, and this is a good thing? Last year, 80% of new car sales in Norway were electric, putting the country at the vanguard of the shift to battery-powered mobility. It has also turned Norway into an observatory for figuring out what the electric vehicle revolution might mean for the environment, workers, and life in general. The country will end the sales of internal combustion engine cars in 2025. Given what we'll see in a minute, I think we'll find Norway turning into a version of Havana, with aging internal combustion engine cars being maintained for longer and longer to do all the jobs that EVs can't, and believe me, there are a hell of a lot of those. But despite all this green virtue, Norway's oil consumption has barely changed. Norway's oil demand hasn't crashed despite record EV market share. The fact that a record 90% share of all new car sales in Norway are electric has failed to make any impact on the country's oil demand, indicating that hopes of rising EV uptake making an immediate dent in global oil demand are unrealistic. Well, who'da thunk it? Last year, 82.4% of all new passenger cars sold in Norway were fully electric, up from 79.3% in 2022, according to the Norwegian Public Roads Administration and the Norwegian Road Federation, OFV. This share has jumped to over 90% this year, but the impact on Norway's oil demand has been negligible, Bank UBS said in a note this week carried by investing.com. Norway has risen to become an EV powerhouse, also thanks to generous financial incentives, translation, taxpayer-funded incentives, which have been partly funded by the Government Pension Fund Global, the world's largest sovereign wealth fund that has amassed its wealth from sales of oil and gas, UBS noted. Ooh, no hypocrisy there, folks. Norwegians, like other consumers, are concerned about vehicle range, and many opt for hybrids or gasoline-fueled vehicles to travel longer distances, according to the bank. Another possibility is that electric vehicles are used for short distances, but Norwegians still rely on fossil fuels to cover longer distances, UBS said in the note. And there it is, in a nutshell. Probably most of the EVs sold in Norway are city cars, most likely a second car for people to use for short journeys close to home. But guess what? When the going gets tough, the fjordsters break out the internal combustion engine cars and trucks, using just as much gas as they ever have done. They know full well that EVs can't deal with cold weather, hills and long journeys, things that Norwegians probably have to contend with more than most. And when reality strikes, the ICE vehicle comes out and the EV is left tucked up in bed at home. If there is a lesson to be learned here, it is that even in Norway, where electricity is cheap, subsidies are plentiful and nearly all new cars sold are now EVs, it makes bugger all difference to oil consumption. Sure, it may have stopped it going up a bit further, but it hasn't made anywhere near as much difference as you'd expect for such a massive cost. In other words, electrification to save the planet is a complete waste of money. So whenever some uninformed evangelist points you to Norway as an example of EV utopia that everyone else can emulate, you'll know they're talking total nonsense.